My name is Dawn. I'm standing in the middle of my living room, which was once a dilapidated mess, but is now a beautiful home I built with my own hands. The housewarming party that was supposed to be for my twin sister, Lily, has just ended in chaos. My parents, Henry and Vera, look defeated, and Lily is in tears outside. It all started a few months ago, and I'm still trying to process how I got here. It was a Friday evening in April when my parents called my sister and me to the dining table. The same table where every important family decision had been made since I was a child. My father, Henry, a 62-year-old retired corporate executive, sat at the head of the table with an air of authority. My mother, Vera, a 60-year-old former socialite, sat beside him, her smile as fake as ever. Across from me sat Lily, my twin, the apple of my parents' eyes. "We've decided to give you girls a head start in life," Henry announced. He slid 2 envelopes across the table, one thick and one thin. Lily opened hers first. Inside was a key to a luxurious penthouse in the city center, along with a deed. The penthouse was worth around $1,200,000. She let out a scream of joy, and Vera immediately pulled her into a tight hug. The room was filled with their laughter and celebration. I opened my envelope. It contained a single rusty key and a piece of paper with an address in the outskirts. I looked at my father, confused. "What is this?" I asked. "It's a fixer-upper. You're good with your hands, so you'll be fine," he said nonchalantly. No explanation, no hug, just a dismissal. My mother avoided my eyes, still lost in her embrace with Lily. Lily tilted her head and said, "At least you got something, Dawn." But I saw the smug look on her face. The next morning, I drove an hour to the address. As I pulled up, I couldn't believe my eyes. The house was in shambles. The roof was caving in, the windows were broken, and the front porch was about to collapse. The yard was overgrown with weeds, and the smell of mildew and rot filled the air. I sat in my car for a long time, just staring at the mess. I called my friend Ethan, a 32-year-old real estate lawyer. He was the only one who had always been honest with me. We met in college, and he was the kind of friend who would drop everything to help. "How bad is it?" he asked. I told him about the roof, the wiring, and the lack of running water. He was silent for a moment. "Do you want me to look at the deed?" he asked. "Not yet," I said, my voice cracking. "I just need a minute." That night, I sat in my truck with a notebook and a calculator. I estimated the cost of repairs: roof, $15,000, floors, $10,000, plumbing, $8,000, electrical, $12,000, paint, drywall, and fixtures, another $18,000. The total came to $63,000. My savings account had only $20,000. I was a carpenter and a furniture restorer. I had been working with wood since I was 15 and I was good at it. But my family never considered it a real career. To them, I was just the twin who worked in a small workshop while Lily wore designer clothes and attended fancy parties. Lily called me the next day. Her voice was sickly sweet, the way it always was when she was about to be cruel. "Dawn, are you really going to live in that dump? You could just sell it and get a decent apartment." I told her I would make it work. She paused and then said, "Okay, Dawn. Good luck with that." My mother texted me that afternoon. "Don't waste your savings, Dawn. Your father knows best." I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to the hardware store and bought a large amount of lumber. Over the next few weeks, I worked tirelessly on the house. I tore out the rotted floors, hauled debris to a dumpster, and started installing new drywall. A neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, an 80-year-old widow, watched me from across the fence. "That's a lot of work, dear," she said. I just nodded. One day, she brought me a glass of lemonade. "This land used to belong to your grandmother, Amelia," she said. I was surprised. "How do you know that?" I asked. "I've lived here for 50 years, dear." "I know who owned what," she replied. 6 weeks later, my savings were gone. But the house was starting to take shape. The new floors were in, the drywall was up, and the roof no longer leaked. I built custom cabinets for the kitchen out of cherry wood. The living room wall that was once crumbling was now smooth and painted a warm shade of beige. However, the electrical system was still a problem. The original wiring was from the 1950s and needed to be completely replaced. A licensed electrician would cost between $8,000 and $12,000, which I didn't have. So, I installed temporary wiring. I knew it wasn't a permanent solution, but it would work for now. One Tuesday afternoon, my father showed up unannounced. He walked through the house, running his fingers over the surfaces. He opened a cabinet door and let it swing. "Not bad," he said after a long silence. I waited for more, but he just left. I noticed the way he looked at the house. It wasn't pride. It was more like an appraisal. A few days later, I went to Lily's penthouse to pick up a tool I had lent her. She said she was busy and couldn't come to the door. But as I stood in the hallway, I saw a stack of credit card bills outside her door. I heard her on the phone whispering, "Mom, I can't pay these bills. The credit card company is calling non-stop." Then my mother's voice came through. "Don't tell your father. We'll figure it out." I left quietly, not saying a word. But it made me wonder how much debt Lily was in and what would happen when my father found out. 10 weeks after I started, the house was almost unrecognizable. I posted some before and after photos on Instagram, and the response was overwhelming. People were amazed that I had done it all by myself. It was the first time I had received so much positive feedback from anyone outside of Ethan. Then one Thursday evening, my parents' car pulled into the driveway. They walked in like they still owned the place. My mother wandered through the rooms, touching everything. My father stood in the middle of the living room and said, "Your mother and I have been talking. Lily needs this house. Her penthouse had some issues, and she can't stay there anymore. The deed is still in my name, so you have 48 hours to move out." I was in shock. I had put so much of myself into this house. I looked at my father and said, "I rebuilt this house with my own hands." He just replied, "It's my land, my decision." My mother stepped forward and said, "We'll make it up to you, dear. This is what's best for the family." I took a deep breath and said, "I need to make a phone call." That night, I called Ethan. I told him everything that had happened. He was silent for a few seconds. Then he said, "Is the deed in his name? Did you ever get a copy or a notarized transfer?" I told him no, that my father had said he would handle it. Ethan said, "That's the first problem. And who actually owns the land?" I remembered Mrs. Thompson's words. "My neighbor said this land used to belong to my grandmother, Amelia." I told him. "Used to or still does?" He asked. I didn't know. "Give me 24 hours, he said. "Don't sign anything, don't move anything, and don't respond to your father." That night, I received a text from my father. "The clock is ticking, Dawn. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I didn't reply. For the first time in my life, I refused to give in. The next morning, my phone was flooded with messages from my mother, Lily, and other family members. They all said the same thing. I was being selfish and that I should just give the house to Lily. My father called and said, "If you fight this, you'll lose the house and your family." I set the phone down and picked up a chisel. I was in my workshop, surrounded by the smell of sawdust and wood. I thought about how my whole life I had been taught to sacrifice for the family. But now I realized that they were using me. Then I got a message in the family group chat. My aunt had accidentally sent a message saying that Lily owed over $200,000 in credit card debt and that my father didn't know yet. I screenshot it and saved it. Ethan called in the afternoon. He said, "The land was never in your father's name. It's held in a trust established by your grandmother, Amelia, in 2005. You're the sole beneficiary." I was in disbelief. I hadn't spoken to my grandmother in years because my father had told me she was confused and that calling her would stress her out. I called my grandmother with shaking hands. She answered on the fourth ring. "Grandma, it's Dawn," I said. There was a long silence. Then she said, "I've been waiting for your call, sweetheart." I told her everything that had happened, and she listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "I set up that trust for you. I saw how your parents treated you, and I wanted to make sure you had something of your own. The next evening, Ethan came to the house with 3 stacks of papers. The first stack was the trust deed, proving that the land and the house belonged to me. The second stack was all the building permits, contractor receipts, and material invoices, all in my name. The third stack was the screenshot of my aunt's message about Lily's debt. Ethan said, "Your father has no legal claim. The 48-hour notice is a bluff." I felt a sense of relief, but I knew the battle wasn't over yet. The next morning, I got a call from my aunt. She whispered, "Your mother is planning a housewarming party for Lily at your house tomorrow. She's invited 20 people and is telling everyone you agreed to it." I called Ethan and told him. He said, "I'll be there and so will your grandmother." I couldn't believe it. My 85-year-old grandmother, who lived 4 hours away, was on her way. That night, I sat in my workshop trying to calm my nerves. I thought about how my family had always painted me as the selfish one, the one who didn't fit in. But I knew the truth. The next day, I arrived at my house at 9 a.m. The front door was propped open, and inside it was filled with people. There were balloons, a banner that said, "Welcome home, Lily," and platters of food. Lily was standing in the middle of the living room, looking happy. My father had his hand on her shoulder, and my mother was smiling. When they saw me, my father said, "Dawn came to congratulate her sister. That's what family does." Everyone turned to look at me, and I could feel their judgment. My mother handed me a glass of lemonade and said, "Be gracious, dear. This is hard for all of us." Lily came over and said, "Dawn, we talked about this. It's for the best." I looked around the room and saw that no one knew the truth. They all thought I was the bad guy. In the kitchen, Lily's true colors showed. "You should thank me," she said. "If it weren't for me, you'd still be in that little workshop." I looked at her and said, "I built this kitchen, Lily. These cabinets, this island, they're mine." She just laughed and said, "That's how it works in this family. You should have known by now." Just then, there was a knock at the door. My father frowned, and my mother looked worried. I went to the door and opened it. Ethan was standing there in a suit, holding a briefcase. Behind him was my grandmother, walking slowly with a cane. My father asked, "Who invited you?" Ethan said, "No one. I'm Dawn's legal counsel." My father said, "This is a family matter. She doesn't need a lawyer." Ethan replied, "Property transfer is a legal matter." My grandmother walked in and looked around the room. She said, "Henry, whose land do you think this is?" My father was speechless. Ethan opened his briefcase and showed the trust deed. He explained that the land and the house belonged to me and that all the renovations were legally mine. The room was in shock. Lily's smile faded, and my mother started to cry. My father's face turned red with anger. Lily stepped forward and said, "This doesn't change anything. I need this house." My father turned to her and asked, "What do you mean you need this house?" Lily broke down and said, "I lost the penthouse. I couldn't pay the bills." The room erupted in chaos. My father was furious, and my mother was trying to calm him down. Everyone started to realize that they had been lied to. Ethan handed my father a cease and desist letter, stating that he was not to enter the property without my written consent. My father didn't take it. He just walked out, followed by my mother. After they left, I looked around the room. The house was a mess, but it was mine. Ethan put a hand on my shoulder and asked, "Are you okay?" I said, "Not yet, but I will be." That evening, I changed the locks on the front door. It was a small act, but it felt like a big step. Mrs. Thompson came over with a bouquet of flowers and said, "I always knew this house was yours, dear." A few weeks later, a reporter from a home improvement magazine contacted me. She had seen my Instagram photos and wanted to feature the house. The article came out and it was a huge success. I started getting custom furniture commissions and my workshop finally had a name, Dawn's Woodworks. Lily came to the house one day. She looked tired and defeated. She said, "I don't know how to fix my life, Dawn. I owe so much money. I told her I couldn't fix her problems, but I could give her the number of a financial counselor. She nodded and said, "I'm sorry for everything." She left a small box on the porch. Inside were 2 silver necklaces that my grandmother had given us when we were kids. I still don't know what the future holds for my family, but I know that I've built a life for myself, a life based on hard work and the truth. I've learned that boundaries are important, and I don't have to sacrifice my happiness for others. I'm finally in control of my own story.